So they made the executive decision to put a stop to Gerald's experiments.
That's weird. Governments don't lie to people. After looking through the community tab, it seems that the last time people recommended I check out this video was around 9 months ago, so hi, welcome back. Took me a little bit, but we finally got here. And I'm sure Kate and Silver are going to be happy that I'm checking out some Sonic again. Now, I do know that there is a follow-up video to this video, which I will check out sooner rather than later, that I can promise you. Regardless, back when we learned about the Sonic lore initially, there was so much to it that I, as an outsider, never knew about. It wasn't just about, a hedgehog that ran really fast. But I also learned that Shadow apparently, at least within the community's opinion, is a very beloved character and one that has a lot of intriguing lore behind them. So I'm really excited to learn more about his origins and how exactly he fits into this universe. But of course, as per usual, please make sure to go support the original video. Link to that is at the very top of the description, like always.
Project Shadow. Possibly the darkest narrative of the entire Sonic series. With a storyline spanning across multiple games, it's a piece of lore that always seems to come back to play a role in one way or another, with an impact sometimes felt to this very day. It involves government conspiracies, assassinations, biological experiments gone wrong, and even aliens. And it all
all that sounds really up my alley. You wouldn't expect those kind of things to be from this children's video game, quote unquote, but Sonic does delve into a lot of subjects like that.
From a scientist attempting to play God. Welcome to Chaomix, and today we'll be uncovering the complete lore of Project Shadow.
Yeah, go and subscribe to Chaomix.
This video is made possible by today's sponsor, 1v1.lol, the amazing hyper battle royale. Choose your champion, each with unique abilities, and select your weapon, all of which you can upgrade and even deck out with some awesome skins. And here's the best part, it doesn't matter if you're a newbie or a pro. The game adjusts to your skill level, making it the perfect playground for every player to build and destroy to their heart's content. And if you're someone who loves variety, the game keeps things fresh with many exciting modes, challenges, and events that change daily. What's cool about 1v1.lol is that you can jump into the action anytime, anywhere. Whether you're on a mobile device or prefer playing on PC or Steam, just download the game for free and start playing right away. And from now until May 15th, you can unlock exclusive skins of some of the biggest YouTubers for free. We're talking about Unspeakable, FaZe Rug, and even Booga, who has a cool pickaxe skin. All you need to do is play the game, gather the necessary items, and you'll unlock these limited skins just like that. Because remember, these skins are available for a limited time only, so don't miss your chance to show off these awesome looks in-game. Make sure to download 1v1.lol and start playing to unlock these exclusive skins before they're gone. Check out the link in the description to get started. Huge thank you to 1v1.lol for sponsoring today's video, and with all that being said, let's continue with today's episode. Over 50 years before the events of Sonic Adventure 2, we have Gerald Robotnik, renowned scientist and grandfather to none other than our very own Dr. Eggman. This scientific genius seems to run in the family, but in complete contrast to his grandson, Gerald is devoted to using science to make the world a better place. One of his greatest accomplishments being...
Honestly, Dr. Eggman could also do that, he just chooses not to. Although, from what I recall, with the ending with Sage from the latest Sonic game, was it Sonic Frontiers, there may be a shift, a slight one. I don't think he'll ever become a good guy, right? I'm sure there have been moments where they have worked together against a much greater threat. But when you think of Sonic, you think of Eggman as his rival, the same way that you think of Mario as well as Bowser.
The Space Colony Ark, the world's first satellite colony allowing people to live in space. The Ark is an incredibly advanced research center created by Gerald for the purpose of allowing great scientists, such as himself, to conduct research and perform experiments for the greater good of mankind. Gerald has a very close bond to his beloved granddaughter, Maria Robotnik. After all, she lives on the Ark with him as she has an incurable and terminal illness called neuroimmune deficiency syndrome, and allegedly the lower gravity would help keep her condition in remission. But this wasn't enough for Gerald. He devoted himself to finding the cure for his granddaughter's disease through science. During this time, Gerald received a request from the president of the United Federation, the Sonic Universe's equivalent of the United States, a research program called Project Shadow. It would be dedicated to developing the formula for immortality.
So is that what we ended up using
Gerald
to make
refused,
Shadow?
as he felt that he would be playing God and that it could possibly be used as some sort of biological weapon for war by Gun or the Guardian units of nations.
I mean, any technology can be used as a weapon, depending on the person using it. I'm sure the person who made pencils wasn't expecting this dude called John Wick to use it to murder people, but it happened.
Which was essentially the United Federation's military. Anyways, it was all morally gray areas Gerald didn't want to step foot in, but he soon realized that something like this could lead to a medical breakthrough, the perfect solution for curing Maria of her illness. So he obliged. Such a task seemed impossible.
It's really a classic tale when it comes to the scientist character, who does have morals and ethics. However, if it benefits somebody who they love within their life, then you can bend that a little bit. Gives them a good enough reason to do so.
At first. But despite the pessimism from his colleagues, Gerald Robotnik spent a great amount of time researching this formula for immortality. However, where do you even begin? Luckily for Gerald, there just so happened to be a set of 7 mystical gems.
It always comes back to the Chaos Emeralds, doesn't it? I mean, they basically contain infinite power, and you can probably harness it for whatever you need to do. Although, at this point in time, where would the Chaos Emeralds be?
Capable of granting miracles and unlimited power. We all know them, the Chaos Emeralds. If Gerald could only just replicate their powers, surely he could convert their energy into a means of granting immortality, right?
How would you do that?
So Gerald began experimenting with ways of replicating the Chaos Emerald's energy and created the Chaos Drives. But the Chaos Drives needed to be created in such a way that living beings would be able to consume their energy. So Gerald began thinking of a vessel that would be able to properly handle this kind of power.
A hedgehog?
It's heavily implied that Gerald based a lot of his research on ancient depictions of such a vessel. And this brings us to the Mystic Ruins, the very land that Angel Island, home of the Master Emerald, was split away from. It had ties to an ancient clan of echidnas that fought over the infinite power of the Chaos Emeralds. It was possible that remnants from this extinct clan held some clues for this formula for immortality. Well,
now that I think about it, didn't we first run into Knuckles because he was convinced by Dr. Eggman that Sonic came to steal the Chaos Emerald or something like that?
Well, it turns out that deep in one of the Echidna shrines, Gerald happened upon an enormous mural. This mural
wait a minute. That's a mural depicting the boss that you end up fighting at the end of, I'm assuming, then Sonic Adventure 2, where it's kind of like the embodiment of chaos, but it's like a giant water monster thing.
Depicted a water serpent devouring an ancient city with carvings of jewels that seemed very similar to the Chaos Emeralds. We know this water serpent as Perfect Chaos from the first Sonic Adventure game.
That's the first one,
thought
okay.
It was possible that such a creature had the ability to harness the power of the Chaos Emeralds, so he began basing several of his prototype experiments after it. The ultimate life form. Someone or something that could never become ill, wither away with age, or die. The experiment started off as pretty straightforward interpretations of this creature from the mural. We can actually see these experimental creatures inhabiting the Ark during the events of Sonic Adventure 2. First, we have the Artificial Chaos P1 variant, which is clearly modeled after Perfect Chaos from the mural. Its body is entirely made up of water and has an almost identical shape to that of Chaos. And it seems to retain both its shape and sentience from this headpiece found on top. Then there's the Artificial Chaos P100 variant, whose body takes a longer, more spherical shape. It's able to split up into tinier versions of itself, with a helmet acting as the master controller. These experiments were a good step in the right direction, but the issue was that these artificial life forms were just that, artificial. How could Gerald move forward and apply this same energy to a biological life form? Well, he would take what he learned from these artificial chaos experiments and begin his work on the prototype of the first ultimate life form, the BioLizard. Its rate of growth was incredibly fast. It had the ability to regenerate and even self-reproduce. And its organs were capable of utilizing the powers of the Chaos Emeralds.
Sounds like an
Everything seemed
SCP.
very promising at first, but the scientists quickly realized that the BioLizard was very, very flawed. Its limbs proved to be weak. so weak that it didn't even possess the ability to walk. But worst of all, the bio-lizard's nature grew extremely violent and primitive, and it became too difficult to control at times. As the bio-lizard continued to grow at an exponential rate, it required an enormous life support system powered by the Chaos drives just in order to sustain its own life. Eventually, an entire specialized room was created just to help the bio-lizard continue living. This room curiously contained an altar for the Master Emerald, likely another result of Gerald's research on the Echidna tribe and Chaos Emeralds. It was most likely supposed to be a way to neutralize the beast's power in the case that it went on a destructive rampage. This was a very dangerous and unpredictable creature that they had on their hands, so the bio-lizard experiments were eventually abandoned and it was sealed into the specialized room.
I mean, hey, that's kind of the nature when you start messing with nature. You're gonna get some results that nobody could control. So I'm assuming that's like one of the things that you end up finding in Sonic Adventure 2 as a boss of sorts.
Word may or may not have leaked out to Gunn about the...
Of course. I should have known. The giant biomechanical lizard that is very violent, potential weapon? Question mark?
Details of this experiment, including all the potential danger it possessed. After all, complaints from the internal staff about the feasibility of this project and even the safety of their own lives were making their way all around the Ark. But meanwhile, Gerald would take what he learned from the bio-lizard experiments and begin work on a new ultimate lifeform, hoping to remove the flaws that plagued his prototype. It's here where Gerald must have found some new inspiration, because his idea for his next experiment would take a much different direction. Instead of basing this next ultimate lifeform on some enormous reptilian, he would downsize to something a lot more streamlined. It's heavily implied that Gerald did additional research at this point, this time on Angel Island itself, for more clues on the perfect vessel for the ultimate lifeform. It's highly probable that Gerald found the ancient mural in Hidden Palace Zone, the one from Sonic 3 and Knuckles that foretells the events of Doomsday Zone, depicting the battle between an enormous evil entity and a supercharged hedgehog. Obviously, a foretelling of Dr. Eggman and Supersonic's battle at the end of that game. So Gerald got to work, and eventually, the ultimate lifeform was born, modeled after this supercharged hedgehog from the mural. Shadow the Hedgehog, the ultimate lifeform.
Bro, that's
Shadow
such
was
a cold
both very
line to
similar
introduce yourself
and
with.
dissimilar to the bio-lizard. First, like his predecessor, he possessed immortality and many of the same chaos control-inducing abilities. But unlike the bio-lizard, Shadow did not need machinery in order to live. He was perfectly capable of functioning, completing tasks, and making decisions on his own. On top of this, he was incredibly strong, agile, intelligent, and fast. But possibly most importantly, his soul was based off of Maria's. You see, Gerald was still skeptical.
Whoa, what are we doing here? How did we base off Shadow's soul from Maria? Do we have some sort of technology that can copy a soul? Are we going into Soma levels of like soul transmission? Which is kind of funny because Madlord just did a review on Soma and I just did a reaction to it like not too long ago, so perfect timing, I guess. Although I probably shouldn't be surprised considering we're doing all these experiments on this giant moon and have already been creating a bunch of different life forms, so our tech is probably advanced enough to do that. But then wouldn't this suggest the existence of a soul if you can use science in order to replicate it? It's a very unscientific kind of science, but I guess not in the Sonic universe.
About the United Federation's true intentions with Project Shadow. In the case something were to go wrong and Shadow would end up being used as a weapon, he had faith that modeling Shadow's soul after Maria would lead Shadow to the correct moral choices in the end.
I see.
And just like that, Shadow quickly became acquainted with many of the people living on the Ark, including Maria, who he would become very attached to. The two would naturally spend a lot of time together, as Maria's condition kept her pretty rooted to certain rooms. And Shadow had plenty of downtime during his time living on the Ark. They would often have deep philosophical conversations with one another. For instance, Shadow had doubts about his true purpose in life, but Maria was always there to assure him that things would be okay. Their conversations and time
I mean, for the both of them, it's understandable Like, try to imagine living life as Maria, being confined to certain rooms within this giant spaceship, never being able to experience the things that others were able to. That sort of isolation can lead to a lot of thinking, a lot of self-reflection too. A lot of wondering about the universe as a whole. And as for Shadow, he's kind of in the same position, sort of an experiment too. I mean, he seems to be treated nicely here, so... But regardless, he is also modeled after her soul, as Chaomix said here. Them having a similar way of thinking is pretty understandable.
Spent together meant everything to Shadow, but in many ways, they both felt trapped inside of the Ark and wanted to do their best to help the people back on the surface have a better future. Both Shadow and Maria longed to visit the Earth together, so they made a promise that when Maria was better and Shadow was finished with Gerald's experiments, they one day would.
I don't think that ends up happening, yeah?
Meanwhile, on Earth, Gunn was getting nervous about the potential dangers and costs of Project Shadow. Word about the dangerous experiments with the bio-lizard had leaked out to them after all. And not only were they worried about this monstrosity that was created, they were worried about this information finding itself in the hands of the public. Gunn and the United Federation did not want the public to know about these experiments they were conducting up on the Ark, so they made the executive decision to put a stop to Gerald's experiments.
That's weird. Governments don't lie to people.
Once and for all. However, it wasn't as simple as asking the team to cease their work. They had to ensure everyone on the Ark would remain silent about Project Shadow, and there was only one way they could guarantee this.
Eradication.
The ultimate life form was nearing completion, and just as Gerald was about to put the finishing touches on his life's work, the space colony Ark was invaded by a swarm of gun soldiers. Everyone on board the Ark was to be executed. Everyone except for Gerald and Shadow. Gunn's plan was simple: destroy all evidence of Project Shadow, including anyone that knew of its existence, and falsely blame it on an experiment gone wrong.
You know, for those of you who know, I won't say any more details about it, but this reminds me of a particular episode in Steins Gate. Phenomenal show, by the way. If you guys haven't seen it, I do highly recommend it.
Accident caused by Gerald Robotnik, all while taking the ultimate life form for themselves. With their plan in motion, Gunn began to slaughter all of the scientists on board the Ark. During the attack, Gerald entrusted and instructed Maria to take Shadow and leave the Ark via an escape pod. They would make their way, but a group of gun soldiers intercepted them, and Maria would end up getting hit by a bullet. Shadow would take out the group of soldiers, and the two desperately limped the rest of their way to the escape pods. Maria, mortally injured, used the last of her strength to activate the escape pod for Shadow, and gave him her final words.
Shadow, I beg of you, please, do it for me. For Maria! Future, for all people who live on that planet, give them a chance to be happy. Let them live for their dreams. Shadow, I know you can do it. That's the reason why you were brought into this world. Sayonara, Shadow.
Completely traumatized, Shadow was then ejected from the Ark down to Earth, never to see his beloved Maria again. All on the Ark were killed that day, and Gerald was taken into custody and placed on Prison Island.
So yeah, well, that's fucked. Of course, Shadow couldn't have a nice, happy backstory, but I think Shadow's design overall is pretty interesting, considering that if you're someone like me, well, before I learned anything about the Sonic lore, and you had just seen Shadow's design, you would assume that Shadow's more so an antagonistic force, and maybe he does sort of play that role sometimes, but certainly here it seems very much like he has goals to help people, to save the world, and that's definitely going to become a driving force for his character throughout any story that he's in. Not too sure where he is currently though. It's also an interesting contrast to Sonic as a hero, because Sonic is very much that free spirit. I don't think Sonic necessarily has the intent to save all of mankind or any sort of grand aspirations like that. Outside of, you know, living freely. And of course, Sonic probably gains those sort of aspects throughout the course of a story. But I guess the difference there is that for Shadow, it's a main driving force, whereas for Sonic, it's something that he picks up along the way.
Gotten word from Gunn that one of the escape pods had ejected. Obviously, this meant that
So
Maria
they're
and
gonna go
Shadow would
hunting for
escape,
Shadow.
right? But eventually, he would learn that Maria was one of the names on the list of those who perished on the Ark. And after learning of his granddaughter's death, Gerald would never be the same. Meanwhile, Gunn managed to track down the escape pod and gain possession of Shadow. They would then put him into a state of suspended animation and secure him deep inside of their facilities where he would remain dormant for years. Gerald would then be forced to continue his work on Project Shadow, this time under much more strict supervision from Gunn. But the idea of losing Maria would strike him with incredible grief, and eventually, Gerald would go insane. During his continued work on Project Shadow, he would scribble formulas on his cell wall. This would be the beginning of his plan to exact revenge on the world for what they took away from him.
And there's the origin story for a mad scientist. Who could have foreseen that using fear and the threat of violence wouldn't really work out for people?
Even under heavy Gunn supervision, Gerald somehow managed to work under their noses and create a deadly contingency plan, a doomsday program, scripted to cause the space colony Ark to collide and destroy the Earth once all 7 Chaos Emeralds were placed into the Ark's Eclipse cannon, a weapon attached to the Ark with the original intention to destroy celestial objects posing as a threat to Earth. And now Gerald had modified the Eclipse cannon to be used against the Earth. He then altered Shadow's mind to carry out this plan to bring all 7 Chaos Emeralds to the Ark upon being reawakened. He even reprogrammed the Bio Lizard as a failsafe to ensure.
Okay, I see. So while ultimately that was Shadow's motivation, he kinda got altered there, so yeah, he does work as an antagonistic force initially until he maybe regains those memories later. Because I do know that you fight Eggman as Shadow at some point, but I forget which game that was.
His plan was saw through until the very end. The pieces were now in place, and Gerald's plan to exact revenge on humanity was set out to play out completely on its own. But Gunn would eventually become suspicious and decide to completely stop all work relating to Project Shadow. And rather than having Gerald sit around as a potential danger, the last thing for them to do was to get rid of the one final remnant of these ungodly experiments, the professor himself. Gerald was sentenced to execution by firing squad, and Gunn would finally put an end to Project Shadow, or so they thought. 50 years later, the events of Sonic Adventure 2 lead to Gerald's plan unfolding exactly how he imagined. Shadow is awakened by Gerald Robotnik's own grandson, Dr. Eggman, who controls Shadow by using his malice towards humans. Together, they manage to collect and place all 7 Chaos.
I see, okay. So I guess at this point, Shadow doesn't remember all of that because his memories are altered, but he still does have this general malice for humans because of the things that they did to Maria, obviously, which is understandable. But I wonder where the shifting point is.
Emeralds into the Eclipse cannon, and the Ark begins its collision towards Earth just as Gerald had set up. However, one thing Gerald didn't account for was Shadow's soul. Remember, it was modeled after Maria, and in the end, Shadow remembers his promise to her, to give humanity a chance. The Earth that they both long to visit together. Rather than destroy it, Shadow chooses to protect it, because it's what Maria would have wanted.
And because it's Shadow, of course, he can control the Chaos Emeralds. Literally built to do so. And obviously you have Super Saiyan Sonic over here.
Seconds away from colliding with the Earth, Shadow uses the last of his energy to warp the Ark via Chaos Control off of its collision course, but doing so would consume the remainder of his energy. In the end, Shadow would sacrifice himself to protect humanity, keeping his promise to the one person who meant everything to him. For a while, Shadow was thought to be dead. The heroic sacrifice seemed to be his final act, an impactful conclusion to the saga that started aboard the space colony Ark. But this story isn't over. This has only been the events told strictly from the perspective of Sonic Adventure 2's narrative. This is not the end of the Project Shadow storyline, because its lore would be expanded on in subsequent titles, adding in additional details and continuing the narrative. Shadow would mysteriously reappear in Sonic Heroes, seemingly having survived the ordeal with the final hazard. This raised many questions. Did Shadow somehow truly and miraculously survive? Is he merely a clone of the original, an android? What exactly is Shadow the Hedgehog? These uncertainties would become central to his character arc moving forward. Unfortunately, Sonic Heroes never answers these questions completely. But don't worry, because all of this and more will be answered as we uncover the remaining details about Project Shadow. So if you remember, Gerald spent a ton of time researching different vessels capable of harnessing the power of the Chaos Emeralds to achieve immortality. That was the entire goal of Project Shadow. You might also remember that there were murals of the Water Serpent and the superpowered Hedgehog that Gerald uncovered and based the Bio Lizard and Shadow off of respectively. But what if I told you that there was another thing that Gerald uncovered during this research period that would lead to significant events unfolding much later on in the future? But before we talk about these events, we need to go back in time for some context. 4,000 years ago, to be exact. We all know about the ancient Knuckles clan from Sonic Adventure 1. I explained how they resided in the Mystic Ruins and were responsible for the mural of the Water Serpent, aka Perfect Chaos. Well, in ancient times, they actually had a rival clan called the Nocturnus clan. The Nocturnus clan were rapidly overtaking land, and eventually they'd run into the Knuckles clan, who were out there basically doing the exact same thing. However, this tribe of echidnas were much more technologically advanced than the Knuckles clan, and the two groups clashed.
Honestly, I didn't think they were also echidnas. It's hard to recognize them. I guess it's because they're also technologically advanced that they basically are the Mega Man version of echidnas now.
With one another for power. The more technologically advanced clan would have the upper hand though, since they had the power of Gizoids on their side. The Gizoids were ancient androids geared towards combat with the ability to rapidly learn and mimic the abilities of their opponents. And with an entire army of Gizoids at their side, the Nocturnus clan was able to mostly overtake the Knuckles clan. Desperate for more power, the Knuckles clan turned towards the Chaos Emeralds. But in their destructive struggle for this power, they awakened Chaos, who laid waste to essentially their entire clan. The Nocturnus clan had no competition at this point, and would go on to conquer almost all of the planet. Almost.
Yeah, it's probably not a good idea to use the one thing that your clan, I'm assuming, vowed to protect and never use because of its infinite power. I know that desperate times call for desperate measures, but well, this is kind of the result of that. You could also argue, though, that this was inevitable. Like, if they didn't try to do anything, this clan would take over anyways, so the end result would be the same. Potentially even worse.
You see, the overwhelming advantage that the Gizoids gave the Nocturnus clan led them to devoting a lot of time and effort into researching them further, and this led to the creation of the most powerful Gizoid of all time, Emerald. Emerald was created with the ability to harness the power of the Chaos Emeralds, and would go on to absorb all information on every form of combat and weaponry of its era. Needless to say, this Gizoid was incredibly strong. So strong that it caught the attention of a literal god, and it was forced to intervene, sealing away the entire Nocturnus clan and every single Gizoid to another dimension for all of eternity. Well, every Gizoid, but one.
I mean, imagine being so strong that a god takes notice of you. Although the end result wasn't exactly desirable, so it's more like you were so successful that you lost, which feels bad, man.
Somehow, Emerald would manage to remain, although sealed away inside of ancient ruins for thousands of years. Now, back to the events of Project Shadow. Allegedly, during the research for creating the ultimate lifeform, the lone Gizoid was uncovered from inside of these ancient ruins and soon found itself in the hands of Gerald Robotnik. The android would be activated completely by accident one day while Gerald was studying the Chaos Emeralds within a close vicinity to it. This would make it apparent that the android was built to harness the power of the Chaos Emeralds, a perfect learning opportunity to be used for Project Shadow. But the professor would also notice that it would mimic all of his movements. And after extensive research, Gerald would soon realize the full extent of its abilities. The professor eventually surmised the history of the Gizoids, and after realizing the danger it possessed, attempted to form an allegiance with it to keep its power under control. The Gizoids are programmed to form an allegiance or link with anyone who displays incredible power. So after feeding it information of some of the modern weaponry of his era, the professor was able to successfully form a link with Emerald. And from then on, Emerald would listen to Gerald and Gerald only. The professor was able to learn a lot from Emerald.
Although, is it a good thing that we taught this Gizoid all of the modern weaponry and how to use them all? I feel like this is gonna backfire real soon.
Which greatly aided the advancement of Project Shadow. However, as we know, the attempts at making the ultimate lifeform took much time and yielded many unwanted results. The United Federation was getting impatient and threatened to put a hold on the research. So in order to buy more time, Gerald offered Emerald to them as a sort of bribe. After all, the fate of his granddaughter was riding on the success of these experiments, but Gerald was worried about the United Federation using the Gizoid for a malicious intent. So before handing it over, he instructed it to cease absorbing any more new combat information.
Alright.
With the Gizoid now in the hands of the United Federation, Gerald was allowed to continue his work on Project Shadow for a little bit longer. And Emerald, just as Gerald instructed, would refuse to listen to the United Federation and deny the absorption of any new combat information. They tried many things in order to override the link it had formed with Gerald, but nothing seemed to work. That is, until they equipped Emerald with a Chaos Emerald. Emerald's allegiance shifted towards the United Federation, who possessed the greater power, the Chaos Emerald, and they would finally be able to perform their experiments. All was going according to plan, but after absorbing an extensive amount of information on modern weaponry and technology, something in Emerald snapped and it would lose control, setting out on a destructive rampage and decimating a large portion of the space colony Ark before finally being subdued. Gerald already—
What the hell? Imagine if you downloaded like too many files into your computer, and instead of your hard drive warning you that the space is full, the computer just gets up and starts smacking you.
knew of the Gizoid's destructive power from his research, and now the United Federation had learned of it as well, the hard way. With the United Federation not wanting anything to do with it after the incident, Emerald would find itself in the hands of Gerald once again. Gerald was to destroy the Gizoid in order to prevent anything like this ever happening again. But after many failed attempts, it was obvious that destroying it was not an option. Instead, Gerald turned towards reprogramming its AI. From this, the professor was able to give Emerald free will and emotions, and eventually insert a sort of digital soul based off of his own beloved granddaughter, Maria.
Once again, we're just putting souls in people. Maria is everybody at this point. Kind of reminds me of the Guilty Gear lore, where basically a lot of the female characters have a little bit of Arya inside of them. Some of them more so than others. It's just, her soul is everywhere. And now I think about it, hopefully this is with Maria's consent, and this isn't just, you know, the doctor, the scientist being a scientist, you know?
Maria. With this new AI, Emerald's threat was greatly reduced. And as an added bonus, Gerald figured out a way to erase its destructive programming, but only after absorbing all 7 Chaos Emeralds and then using a simple key phrase: bring hope to humanity. These were the last words spoken by Maria before she died aboard the Ark. This implies that Gerald was forced to reprogram Emerald during his time in Prison Island, after the attack on the Ark. Anyways, after this final
Oh, does it though? Like, how would he know what Maria's final words were if he wasn't there and he was, you know, caught and imprisoned? Because from what we saw there, it was basically just Maria and Shadow, unless if Shadow told him. Or, you know, it's just one of Maria's things that she says all the time.
By Gerald, Emerald would be sealed away. That is, coincidentally, until Gerald's own grandson, Dr. Eggman, would uncover him once again 50 years later. However, frustrated by Emerald refusing to listen to him, the Doctor tosses the seemingly useless android away on Emerald Beach, where he's soon discovered by Sonic and friends. The group is quick to befriend him, taking turns mentoring the android, and it would go on to learn the value of things like friendship. Emerald quickly gains more and more sentience, picking up on unique traits and quirks from each character who befriends it. But out of everyone, Shadow was possibly the one able to relate to Emerald the most.
I wonder why. I was gonna say, like, how is Shadow and Emerald here going to interact with each other, considering they're basically the same soul, or a copy from the same soul? And they both also control chaos energy, so potential team up or rivalry? Not sure.
All their souls were modeled after the same person. Being at least partially a product of Gerald's creation, the two contemplated why they were given souls in the first place. Were they weapons for war? Tools to maintain peace? In the end, it was up.
That's actually a really good question. This was something that they talked about too when we learned about the Mega Man lore. Or I guess just more so about Dr. Wily. We still have yet to do like a proper video on all the Mega Man lore. And it also reminds me of the movie The Iron Giants, which if you guys haven't seen it, I also highly recommend it. Really based off of the idea of if a gun had a soul, like what would it do?
To them to discover the answer to these questions. And so Emerald and Shadow would gather all 7 emeralds and speak the key phrase, bring hope to humanity, which granted Emerald complete freedom from his destructive programming that would sometimes kick in. Emerald was finally free, or so they thought. Emerald would be sent to put a stop to another one of Dr. Eggman's schemes, but Eggman tricks Emerald into witnessing an incredible display of power. It's here where Eggman shoots an enormous laser out into space, completely obliterating a group of stars. With a display of power so immense, it causes Emerald's innate destructive programming to take over, and it goes on a rampage, hijacking Eggman's laser and aiming it directly at Earth. It seemed that Gerald's failsafe was a complete bust.
Not even his scientific genius could tame the wild power of the Gizoid.
Left with no choice, Sonic is
classic scientists messing with things that we don't understand, thinking that we have everything under control. And then, of course, it all backfires in the end.
Tragically forced to defeat Emerald in battle, gravely wounding him. But Maria's soul comes through right at the very end, and Emerald regains control over itself to say its final goodbyes to the wonderful friends it made along the way before vanishing forever.
And yeah, like, her soul gets through in the end, so is that, like, Maria, is she experiencing that even though she's already passed, but a piece of her is left here? Like, what are the implications here? Do we even get into those implications, or do we just kind of like say that, yeah, that's a piece of her soul, it's a little bit of her, and you feel bad for killing Maria?
The story of Gerald and Emerald is a tragic tale that fits retroactively into the existing lore of Project Shadow. However, there's still more to this story, and it's here where things take an unexpected twist. This is the story of the Black Arms, an evil alien race who secretly had a large helping hand in the development of Project Shadow. The Black Arms reside on the Black Comet, a celestial body that passes Earth once every 50 years. Commanded by their supreme leader, Black Doom, their ultimate goal is to punish humanity for their history of horrendous transgressions by taking over their planet and using them as sustenance.
To punish humanity for their heinous transgressions? Yeah, justified. If any alien race learned of the things that we do, and I guess they were better than us, then yeah. They could use that as a convenient excuse or a legitimate reason. Just like how in Age of Ultron took like 15 minutes to look at Reddit, and then he was like, yep, humanity's got to get wiped out.
Some of the earliest history of the Black Arms can be traced back at least 2,000 years ago, right on Earth, where they created a stronghold in the Glyphic Canyons. This stronghold, also known as the Holy Ground, is capable of becoming airborne and firing powerful laser beams. The Black Arms created the stronghold for future use, when the time was finally right for them to invade Earth. So previously, I mentioned how Shadow the Hedgehog was eventually created using what Gerald had learned from the BioLizard experiments, and then modeled after the depiction of Supersonic from the murals in Hidden Palace Zone.
So is the evil presence that this hedgehog had fought one of the Black Arms? Was that like foreshadowing that?
But in actuality, at least according to the game Shadow the Hedgehog, there's a whole lot more that happened in order to create the ultimate life form that we were never told about. You see, Gerald didn't just create Shadow with his own scientific genius all by himself like we originally thought he did. The professor had some help. Actually, even the BioLizard had a little bit of help from behind the scenes. Around the same time Gerald was planning out the creation of the BioLizard, the Black Comet, which again passes Earth every 50 years, happened to be in the middle of its rounds. Completely stumped on how to make any progress with Project Shadow, Gerald made contact with the Black Arms and requested their assistance. I mean, what could possibly go wrong? The professor explained the troublesome situation that Project Shadow was in, and Black Doom agreed to assist Gerald with creating the ultimate lifeform, even providing his own DNA, which would help grant it certain attributes like immortality and the ability to use chaos control. This was exactly what the professor was looking for. However, there was one condition to this deal. During the next passing of the Black Comet, 50 years later, Gerald would have the ultimate lifeform assist the Black Arms in gathering the 7 Chaos Emeralds. What exactly did they plan to do with these emeralds? Well, they didn't exactly specify. Now, if you're thinking this sounds kind of iffy already, you're goddamn right. But
if you knew the conditions for this, like, would you agree? I think it's a bad idea, but I guess our good doctor over here is kind of at a tight spot and probably not in good headspace right now.
Being Being extremely desperate for results, Gerald was completely willing to accept this deal. Obviously, the Black Arms were up to no good, so the professor devised a plan to secretly thwart whatever they were trying to do 50 years in the future. Yeah, remember the Eclipse Cannon? I previously mentioned how it was built with the purpose of destroying celestial objects posing as a threat to Earth, but little did we know at the time, it was built with a very specific celestial object in mind. The Black Comet.
Yep.
Gerald had no intention to keep his end of the bargain. The professor built the Eclipse Cannon with the intention of completely betraying the Black Arms and obliterating their comet with the laser before they could even pay Earth a visit 50 years later. However, as we know, Gerald's plans were cut short when the Ark was raided and he was incarcerated on Prison Island. And with his utter disdain for everyone and everything at that point after what they did to his beloved Maria, there'd be no reason for him to warn anyone about the inevitable threat arriving 50 years down the line. If anything, the Black Arms—
I mean, it's honestly a good way to implement a future story arc with new and added information without really changing anything that happened in the past. Because I'm sure at the point that they had initially made this backstory that they didn't think of the Black Arms as a thing. Or honestly, maybe there was foreshadowing to it, like in that mural. But to me, it seems more like a good retcon, let's say, where it recontextualizes some of the information that we already knew.
Arms invading and completely obliterating the Earth would be the perfect plan B in case his original Doomsday program didn't work out. And if his Doomsday program did work, he'd totally be screwing over the Black Arms at the same time. No Earth equals no Chaos Emeralds. So either way, Gerald would be winning.
A win's a win.
Of course, we all know that Gerald's plan to destroy the Earth fails because of the heroic actions of Sonic and Shadow at the end of Sonic Adventure 2. But now, the Black Arms are set to arrive to Earth without any warning. In exactly 50 years after the pact between Professor Gerald Robotnik and Black Doom being made, the Black Arms arrive to Earth and immediately begin their rampage, starting with a full-scale attack on the city of Westopolis. Shadow, who's nearby and happens to see this all unfold, is immediately approached by Black Doom, commanding him to collect all 7 Chaos Emeralds as per their promise. Obviously, Shadow has no idea what this creature is or what he's talking about. And throughout the game, it's completely up to the player to choose who to take orders from. Black Doom, Sonic and Friends, Eggman, or Shadow can even forge his own path. And especially with Shadow being so confused—
I wonder if the choices actually mean anything in this game. Because 4 whole different choices for everything in the game seems like a lot. Granted, we don't know how many choices there are, or how many different ways you can go. I'm not familiar at all with the gameplay for this one.
About his own identity during the course of this game, it's the perfect reasoning for him to be just as likely to pick any of these options. But no matter what choices you make during the course of this game, there's a few crucial plot details to Project Shadow that we learn within the various possible paths. Immediately following the attack on Westopolis, the commander of Gun himself accuses Shadow of siding with the aliens, regardless of the player's actual choice. You see, the commander of Gun has a grudge against the ultimate lifeform. As a child, he lived aboard the Ark with his parents, who worked there as scientists.
What the hell?
He was also good friends with Maria, and they'd often play together while the grown-ups were hard at work. One day, after playing around the Ark with Maria, he stumbles upon the moment of Shadow's creation, the forging of the pact between Gerald and Black Doom. This was already a traumatizing event for the poor boy, but not long after, the Ark would be invaded by Gun, killing his entire family and his best friend Maria in order to keep the entire project a secret. Why was he spared while Maria was killed? Maybe it was because she was trying to escape with the ultimate lifeform. Maybe it was because he was slightly younger and Gun actually took mercy on him. But either way, assuming the young boy knew nothing, Gun took him under their guardianship, leading him towards a path in life that eventually resulted in him becoming the head commander of Gun. And
so you joined the organization that killed your best friend. And instead of trying to destroy the organization from within, you're using the organization's power to track down the ultimate life form because of many, many assumptions that you made on your part. Now granted, seeing the big bad guy show up and start destroying people, and knowing that the big bad guy was also involved in the creation of Shadow, I could see the link there, but I don't know what you're doing, bro.
Since that fateful day, the commander blamed Shadow for the death of his loved ones and swore to get his revenge. The commander does eventually confront Shadow one-on-one, and after a brief battle, he realizes that Shadow truly doesn't remember anything from his past, making it difficult to sustain his rage against the hedgehog. Because for the first time, he begins to relate to Shadow. They both lost everything on the Ark that day. Maybe him and Shadow weren't so different. We'll get back to the gun commander in a bit, but
We're not so different, you and I. But yeah, like, it's super hard to hate somebody who doesn't hate you back. I feel like the initial reasoning, though, is a little bit weak sauce, but the turnaround, it seems okay. It's fine. And it's not like human beings are rational. We can associate all these things with our own mind and come up to conclusions that don't really add up, but it makes us feel a certain way, so we act upon it.
let's now talk about Shadow's identity. Depending on which routes you take, you'll get an assortment of different answers. The original Ultimate Lifeform, an android, a pawn of Black Doom, the protector of the space colony Ark. But what is the canonical answer? Who is Shadow the Hedgehog? Luckily, the true ending of the game shows us what actually happens. Shadow manages to collect all 7 Chaos Emeralds. For whom did he collect them for? Well, it's actually ambiguous because of the open-endedness of the entire game. But either way, Black Doom steals them and uses their power to teleport the Black Comet down to Earth. The Black Comet, reacting to the Earth's atmosphere, then produces a gas enveloping the entire planet. This gas, which the Black Arms are naturally immune to, causes complete paralysis of the body, making it extremely easy for all living things to be devoured live by the bloodthirsty alien race. But because Shadow was created with Black Doom's DNA, he too turns out to be immune to this gas. Shadow uses this as an
Only
opportunity
Shadow.
to pursue Black Doom, and it's here where he learns the shocking revelation, that he was created with Black Doom's own blood. He too is technically part of the Black Arms hive mind. With the horror of this realization, Shadow succumbs to Black Doom's control. That is, until Team Chaotix managed to activate a pre-recorded message from none other than Gerald Robotnik. This message, containing the truth, is broadcasted across the entire world just as last time. The truth about the Ark, about the Black Arms' involvement in Project Shadow, about the government's foul play, but most importantly, about the Eclipse Cannon and its intended use against the Black Comet. The gun commander, also viewing this broadcast, finally learns the truth about Project Shadow for himself. Gun, the very organization that he ended up devoting his life to, was the one that killed everyone aboard the Ark on that fateful day in a
Okay, I see. Thank you for the clarification. He didn't know that was the case. And then, I guess, outwardly to the public, Gun is like the public security, seen as the good guys that you send in when somebody does a bad thing. But that video is like one hell of a bombshell to drop on the entire world.
horrible act of corruption. And Shadow and Gerald, they were simply the scapegoats. It seemed that he was truly wrong about Shadow the Hedgehog this entire time. It turns out, Shadow was actually humanity's last hope. And with this, Shadow regains his footing, breaking free of Black Doom's control, causing Black Doom to flee and leave the Chaos Emeralds behind. And with all 7 Chaos Emeralds in his possession, Shadow is able to use them to activate his super form once again. Black Doom then reveals his true form, Devil Doom, and the two face off in a gargantuan one-on-one battle. Mustering up all of his strength, Shadow battles the very being that created him. During this battle, Eggman confirms that Shadow is not an android or a clone, but the original that we've come to know from Sonic Adventure 2.
Shadow, can you hear me? This might be the last chance I have to speak to you, so everyone thought you died during that horrible incident. But I rescued you with one of my robots. You lost your memory, that's all. You really are the ultimate life form my grandfather created.
With Shadow finally
Hey, shout out to Eggman. At least for telling the truth here. Because I do remember when we learned about the Sonic lore, that Shadow did show up and kind of like introduced himself as an android, like he thought he had died or something along those lines, or somebody told him that he was a copy. And going through life like that, knowing that you're a copy of your original self, or thinking that you are one, I don't know how I'd fare. We did learn something similar during the whole Spider-Man clone saga that we did here on the channel. And it's very understandable why you would have an existential crisis at that point. But with this added knowledge, plus the video that played earlier telling us who we are and what our purpose was, Man, that's such a powerful moment for really any character, but especially for Shadow here, because he had forgotten all about it, believed that he wasn't the original one either. And with the gameplay mechanics having like 4 different choices, it seems, also playing a role into that where you're trying to find out who you are, trying to decide who you are through your actions.
Finally fully understanding his true purpose and who he really is, he defeats Devil Doom, uses Chaos Control to move the Black Comet directly in front of the Space Colony Ark, and fires the Eclipse Cannon point blank into it. This obliterates the comet, and with it, the entire Black Arm species to extinction.
Damn.
Shadow.
Oh god. Rest in peace, the Black Arms, I guess? I don't know if I could even say that word in a video. The entire race got wiped out, though. That's cold, Shadow.
With the reassurance of Gerald, was once again able to fulfill his promise to Maria.
Hell
to bring
yeah.
hope to humanity.
You know, after that introduction, I knew I would like this. There are so many cool elements mixed in here. And you could also see a lot of experimentation when it comes to the story of Sonic. I'm pretty sure that's something that we had talked about when we initially learned about it as well. There were some hits and misses every now and then, and a very long portion of time where they decided to play it safe with the story. So it's refreshing to see stuff like this happening. However, that isn't all the information that we know about Project Shadow, so I'll definitely have to check out the next video as well. But anyways, dudes, that's gonna do it for me today. Thank you guys so much for watching, hope you enjoyed, and I'll catch you in the next one.